Greetings to us and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about three cards that I think should be played this format. Uh, I was looking at a lot of regional topping lists for this past weekend, and I saw that the format is developing to a state where people are leaning away more from the Snake Eye decks and the voiceless decks, but at the same time they are playing respecting those strategies, and some decks are either playing snake eyes as part of their engine, or they're playing a lot of cards that just work as silver bullet cards for snake eyes in general. Whether or not you're a snake eye player, I'm going to recommend three cards that I think should be played this format, at least until like the format shapes up or just like changes, because I think the format already that we have is being established. I think unless you play in a super major event, you're not going to see Snake Eye like to a marginally dominant degree, but in major tournaments and in other like given settings, you might see the deck a lot more often. That being said, uh, following the trends of what's happening, I kind of want to talk about three separate cards. And the first card I want to talk about is Small World. So, you essentially already know what Small World does by now, but if you don't, basically you just swap out a monster that is in your hand for another monster that has only one thing in common between level, attack, attribute, and type. So in a heavy hand trap format where you're going to be playing hand trap as like at least one third of your deck, Small World works really well because basically if you go first and you see a lot of those hand traps, but you don't see enough of your engine, this can swap out the cards in your arsenal that are your defensive cards into cards that you can use to just play the game. It could be either starters or extenders. Like one example I can give is like, say for example, you have Ash Blossom in your hand. You can activate Small World, reveal Ash Blossom, then reveal FF Veiler, and then reveal like Snake Eye Poplar. That's just like one example I can give you. But yeah, if you're playing a heavy combo deck or just any deck that just plays a lot of non-engine, but you want to play key monsters as your like one card starters, for example, I think Small World is very excellent. Against non hand trap decks, I think this card's also very fine if your deck has like very specific combos. The card can be a -1, but if you just play your deck correctly, like you will circumvent from that -1, just being ahead of your opponent, and it just makes the deck a lot more consistent. Worst case scenario, you like finish your combo or just like do all your plays that you want your deck to do, and you can just turn whatever surplus cards that you had from your strategy and turn them into hand traps. So yeah, I highly recommend Small World. I think this card is not being like played enough. Uh, and whether or not you're playing Snake Eyes, I think you should consider this card if you're playing a lot of non-engine. The next card I want to talk about is not just one card; it's two cards together, and those cards are Conic Wizen and Shirabancho. So I already talked about these cards in my channel. I have a dedicated guide to Valence. But for those who are unfamiliar with these cards, essentially what this card does is it doesn't matter which one you draw. One will activate the other one in the opposing spell and trap zone, and you can use both effects as long as they're both in the spell and trap zone. I mean, in the field spell zone. Conic Wizen pushes a monster to the spell and trap zone, and Chirabancho can special a monster from the spell and trap zone. So essentially, these two field spells work like Snake Eye Flamberge Dragon. Uh, However, the way that it works is in order to special summon from the spell and trap zone, it has to be it could be from anywhere, but from pushing the monster to the spell and trap zone, it has to be adjacent to another monster in the same column. So this one is a little bit more restrictive on what it does. Uh, Another really cool thing about Conic Wyzen is if a monster is in the same column as an occupied spell and trap, that spell and trap that is occupied goes to the graveyard and the monster goes to the spell and trap zone. So that's really cool if your opponent is not playing around columns. Let's say like there's like a summon limit and there's like, for example, an Appaloosa in the same column as the summon limit. You can use Conic Wyzen, push the Appaloosa to a spell trap, and if the summon limit is occupying that zone, you just push away the summon limit and you pushed away the Appaloosa. And you just essentially just got rid of two floodgate monsters with just Conic Wyzen. Uh, Granted, you also need to control a monster in the same column, so that's a disclaimer. Against if you're playing any deck or strategy that just places monsters in the spell and trap zone, it could be Snake Eye, it could be Centurion, it could be Dragoonity, it could be Crystal Beast, it could be the Valence deck itself. I really, really recommend these two cards. I think these two cards are really good. Like as stepping stones for your strategy. The synergy with Snake Eye Poplar and these cards are also very phenomenal. It just turns Poplar into like two extenders, more than one, if you resolve this card. If you don't want your opponent to be using these cards, the way you do it is you just get rid of one of the field spells, which is not really that hard to do, depending on your strategy. Uh, but yeah, I really, really recommend these cards. These cards are really, really good. The last card I want to talk about is, and I saw one regional topping list that did play this on their main deck, and the card is Sales Ban. So, for those who don't know what Sales Ban does, Sales Ban, you declare a card name, and for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot activate that card that you declared. However, for the rest of the duel, you cannot activate the card that you declared. So, in a format where Crossout and Lullaby are two very popular cards, I think this card is just as good as those two cards because uh, the reason I evaluate this card over something like Lullaby or something like Crossout is because one, you don't have to play specific cards in your deck. Two, this card works well going first or second. And thirdly, this card can also function as a board breaker. If your opponent has a problematic card on the board and you just don't want to deal with it, you just call the card and the sales ban will just force an interaction on your opponent. Let's say, for example, your opponent has the standard Appaloosa IP Flamberge setup in Snake Eye. You can do sales ban and call one of three things. You can either call Flamberge Dragon and shuts down the Flamberge Dragon from doing the graveyard effect. You can call Appaloosa and you no longer have to worry about Appaloosa negating. Or you can call SP Little Knight and you just free yourself from an interruption that could be summoned from Appaloosa. The only way they will play around that is if they play Nightmare Unicorn, but you can't play around everything. You can also call the IP Masquerena itself and just force your opponent to activate the IP and resolve it before you do more plays. Uh, Decks that I think are work really well with this card are pretty much board breaking strategies. Like I've been seeing the Power Spell Snake Eye deck being taken off as of late. That's an excellent deck for this card. Sky Striker is also a deck for this card. Uh, the Snake Eye deck itself, I think this card is really good in that one. Like Lullaby of Obedience kind of gives you another uh, level of advantage besides this card. However, this card can be applied to more things than Lullaby of Obedience. Uh, Another thing to note is this card affects the player, it does not affect the monster. So, unaffected monsters like Expertly Noir do get hit by this card. So uh, that's essentially like the last thing to bring up. I hope you found this video informative. I kind of wanted to make this a little bit short. Uh, we're in a very open format, despite the snake eye domination, and I feel like in a format like this one, player knowledge and like analysis on key cards and strategies are the things that are going to be very advantageous for you. uh, the player that decided to play salesman in their deck just had a huge level of advantage because they pretty much found a level of extra utility to this card that not other people saw, and that was enough to just give them a regional top. But yeah, I hope you found this video informative to your liking and understanding. I'm gonna stop rambling. Keep practicing and keep dueling.